In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, it's going to be a fun one because I have the crew with me, Richard Stayman and Leif Thulin, and we are going to talk about our biggest draft misses, not our wins, our misses, the guys that we got totally wrong, and we're also going to discuss how those misses have helped impact our scouting eye going forward. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that's made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board and the founder of NBA Draft Junkies. And to my left, if you're watching on YouTube, I have Richard Stayman, Mr. Mavs Draft. The Dallas Mavericks started training camp today. And then we have Leif Thulin, the guy that watches more college basketball than anyone else. What's going on, guys? It's been a couple weeks. I moved, and that was a hassle. Moving is the absolute worst. But it's been a couple weeks since we've been on together. How's everything going your way, Richard?
It's been quiet. I'm excited that we're, as of recording this, 8 days away from our first preseason game of the year, and it's the Mavs go to I want to say it's Abu Dhabi. They play. Yep. They play the Timberwolves somewhere. And they're starting their overseas tour. They'll make their way to Madrid. I'm excited. Basketball at the highest level is back.
So check this out. So I'm actually going to Madrid to scout, and I was hoping to go to the Mavs game. The day, like the prices leading up to the Mavericks game are ridiculous. Like trying to leave on the 9th, $2,300. Trying to get there on the 10th of the day of the game, $2,300. Then the price drops to like $650 if I get there on the 11th. So I'm going to miss the Mavericks game, but I'm going to watch Real Madrid. Their second team is loaded with NBA prospects. I mean, they're probably a couple years away. And then I'm going to hopefully catch a couple EuroLeague games in Monaco and then just scout a few prospects that I think could be in the 24, possibly 25 draft. Leif, what's going on your way? You still got I know you're an NBA fan, but you still got almost 2 months until college basketball starts.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait for basketball in general. Like I like football, don't get me wrong, and my tennis season is over, so I'm ready for basketball of any capacity, and I'm working with the Jazz again this year, so I'm happy to be around it up close and doing stats for the highest level. And then once college basketball comes around, I'll be extremely busy, but I can't wait for it because that's what I look forward to.
Yeah, I can't keep up with football anymore. I used to know football like I know basketball. Now, I probably can't even tell you the starting quarterback for half the teams. I don't know the coaches. And I mean, now it's like, and I went years without watching football. So I'll watch a game and I'll see a guy and he'll have the same uniform as a player from the past. And I'm just like, I'm just way off. I know a couple guys. I mean, I know like Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, but I'm a Bengals fan. I don't even know who their starting running back is. I think it's like Joe Mixon or something like that. But anyway, let's talk about the biggest misses. And we all have them. A lot of people like to talk about their wins and the guys that they got right. But I want to hear your biggest misses. I know I have my list of misses, and some of my misses aren't guys that ended up not having the career that I thought. Some of them have way better careers than I expected. And so I'll let you go first, Richard. Who is like the number one miss? And then why do you think you missed out on this player?
I feel like I have to start with Walker Kessler because I had him 70 something, but I actually don't think he's my number one. He's like an honorable mention before I even get to number one. For me, I think the big miss that I really had was I doubted Trae Young. I had Colin Sexton higher. I thought Colin Sexton would be a better defender than he is. I thought he could overcome his frame because his motor was so good. He just didn't become that playmaker. We knew the red flags around the playmaking. I thought it would get better with better talent. And Colin Sexton's been a good player, but there's no point where any redraft you're taking Colin Sexton over Trae Young. And for me with Trae Young, I think what it taught me was these yeah, he was ball dominant and the shot was low release and he was unconventional, but unconventional doesn't mean like it won't translate. And that was a big wake up call for me, was just knowing Trae Young's game, the way he reinvented a lot of how we look at basketball, especially shooting. He was a revolutionary player, and I should have seen it with the production that he had.
Yeah, he was a miss for me. I thought there's no team that's going to give him the freedom and green light. I watched him play live, I think, at the Big 12 tournament. I think it was against Oklahoma State, and he was just drawing fouls, and it was like, I don't know if I like him, but then it's like, dang, he had 26 points. Have I ever told you guys my Trae Young story about playing pickup against him?
No.
So this is, gosh, it's got to be like 2013 or something like that. So Trae used to spend a lot of time in Dallas, and he was up at Prestonwood, the high school that Julius Randle went to. And so I'm training this kid, and I feel like I've told this story before, but I'm training this kid, and I'm working with him, and then I'm like, man, let's play 2-on-2. So we go play 2-on-2, and actually the kid had a brother, and so it was like the younger brother and then Trae. So Trae looked, if he was 12, then he looked 9, right? So we're playing, and I think my team might have scored the first 3, and then we missed a shot. They get the ball. And Trae, he plays the exact same way that he plays now. So he's not missing threes. So I'm like, all right, let me get up on him. So I try to go get up on him. And then he's just he's just scoring on me at will. I mean, they were beating us like 15-5, 15-6, 15-3. So I totally forgot about it, right? And then I would see Trae from time to time. And then the day he got drafted, the kid that I was training was like, well, I hope it makes you feel better that was Trae Young that was killing you a few years back. And I never put 2 and 2 together that was Trae Young. And so I ended up running into Trae at a Mavs game, and I told him the story, and he remembered exactly the story. So I've been doubting him for a long time, and he was just someone that I thought, like I said, I didn't think he'd get the same freedom he had at Oklahoma in the NBA, and he's definitely proven me wrong. I thought he was going to go where he went, but after he had that terrible summer league, it made me feel even more confident. Like, yeah, Trae Young is not going to be that guy in the NBA, and it just shows that summer league means absolutely nothing in a sense because he was bad. Leif, who is your biggest miss, and what have you learned from that?
I'd say Walker Kessler for me, actually. I had him initially about 30, which isn't crazy. And then I started to think about nitpicky stuff that I think he improved. So I will give a little bit of a caveat of like, I think one of my big things is like, I think he'll need to lose weight to run better at the NBA level. Cause at Auburn, he would run all right, but then he'd just plant himself in the paint and just be a rim protector. And he didn't recover much. He'd just wait there and block shots. And his timing was impeccable. His timing's still impeccable. He's a better athlete than I realized, and I think he lost weight and he got like his legs got stronger and he kind of just lost baby fat. And I after seeing him at the Jazz all season last year, and I'll see him again this year, it became very clear that the timing, the intangibles just weren't teachable. And I thought that was going to fade at the NBA level, that his athleticism looked better than it actually was at the college level. I was like, oh, he's beating up on guys who can't shoot, so he knows to wait in the paint and block these shots. So I think I ended up having around 50, and I moved him late in the process last year. So I was kind of annoyed at myself. I even thought that it was a reach at 22 for the Timberwolves, but I knew they were going to take him because they wanted to go with the too big look. And then now he's on the Jazz, and boy, he makes me look silly all the time, and I'm happy for it.
Yeah, I got him wrong. Steve Kerr doesn't seem like to be a big believer either, because I felt like he should at least got some minutes. And I feel like he'd probably even be more effective in FIBA play because we know he can rebound and block shots. So that was one I definitely got wrong. For me, I'd say the biggest miss, and if a person wanted to go back and make fun of me, if you go back on my NBA Draft Junkies YouTube channel, one of my very first videos was on Alex Len. I thought Alex Len was going to be a star. I'm like, man, he can post up. He shows flashes of being able to shoot. He's got little spunk to his game, a little toughness. And I mean, Alex Len has been in the NBA for it's got to be at least 10 years now. So I mean, he's made, a living, but I thought he was going to be at least an all-star level center. And I was totally wrong about that. And honestly, I can't even tell you what the lesson I learned from that one, other than I was just totally wrong about Alex Len. All right, when we return, you'll hear more about our biggest draft misses since we started evaluating NBA prospects. Stay tuned. All right, before we get into that, let's talk about DoorDash, because have you ever felt like you were ready to make some food and you realized that you didn't have everything you needed? You missed the syrup on your pancakes, or you forgot your favorite coffee creamer? With DoorDash grocery delivery, you can get what you want right when you need it. If you love the convenience of getting what you want right at your door, then you got to check out DoorDash grocery delivery, because you can stock up for the week or order last-minute cravings with convenience. So you all know about DoorDash as far as delivering from your favorite restaurants, but now you can get the grocery delivery with thousands of grocery stores to choose from. You can find the best in your neighborhood, and you can actually boost the local economy with each order. You'll get exactly what you ordered, or they will make it right. So sit back and enjoy quality groceries just like you picked them yourself. And if you want more value, you can save on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a $0 delivery fee on all eligible orders with a Dash Pass membership. Up to $20 when you use the code LOCKEDONNBA at checkout. Again, this is just a limited time offer and terms apply. That is 50% off up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and $0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter the code LOCKEDONNBA. So do not forget the code LOCKEDONNBA for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. All right, in the first segment, we talked about Trae Young, and I probably ran too much time off the clock talking about my Trae Young story. And we talked about Alex Len as the guy that, again, I still don't know what I learned from that, other than I just really liked Alex Len's game, and I thought it was pleasing, and I thought that he was this inside-outside threat. And then we talked about Walker Kessler, who I guess we all got that wrong, and I even jokingly felt like Steve Kerr got it wrong. All right, we'll start with you this time, Leif. Who was another player that you got totally wrong and you feel like you learned a lesson from it?
I have two that come to mind, and I think the lesson learned is more situational than necessarily like applicable to everything. But I would say Marvin Bagley, because I'm such a college basketball fan, I didn't actually think he'd be better. Like, I didn't think his ceiling was better than that of Luka Doncic's. And I thought that Marvin Bagley had a higher immediate floor because there would be no way that he would be unable to rebound and score at the next level. I didn't think that much about his defense, but I just figured his athleticism would keep him at a good enough NBA player. I didn't think he was a star. So it's not like I had him number one overall and I totally missed the wagon. But I think what I realized is that players that have deficiencies in college, even if they're, compensated by athleticism like he did on defense, but he was still not a good defender in college. I shouldn't project that to necessarily get better, because the situation at Duke was just fine and they had to play a zone because he was that bad defensively and he was with Wendell Carter. And so I think my big miss there is I should probably trust my eyes and not project just because I think he's got an alluring skill set. That said, I think the reason I don't feel like this is the worst miss ever is I still had Luka ahead of him, which is basically what that whole draft was. It was like, if you missed and have Marvin Bagley ahead of Luka, you really screwed up, just like the Kings did. And that's why Vlade Divac, and you guys know that whole saga. But I think that's the applicable one. And the other one that comes to mind is Blake Wesley. And I'm not ready to call that one a miss yet, but I was very high on Blake Wesley. And I just don't know if he'll have that opportunity to prove me right. But so far, it just hasn't looked super promising yet.
It's still early on him. I mean, he missed a significant amount of time last year with an injury. And so I think, even like Devin Vassell, it took him a little bit of time to get going. Who's yours, Richard?
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with the big and then give a shout out to somebody else as well, real fast. But this is kind of the elephant in the room. I think most people missed on this guy because if he was born 10, 20 years before, he was a star. And that hint alone should be obvious. Jahlil Okafor. I thought he was going to be so special. Same reasons you did with Alex Len, right? The post game, he just was born in the wrong era. And that was kind of the shift for me, even though he was rookie of the year, right?
I think he was first team all rookie.
I
know he had a really good rookie
year. Rookie of the year, but I mean, he was successful the first year. And then after that, though, it was like, okay, bigs are being phased out. That wasn't something we knew was going to happen right away, like as fast as it did. And I think that was kind of the mistake, but that was something everybody got wrong. But the other one for me, this is something you can't, the way this guy has failed is partially where he went, but also there were some flags about his game where he had minimal margin for error. And this is a recent pick, and I'm ready to write it off as a miss, is James Bouknight. I was really all in on his. Yeah, because you remember when we first started this podcast, it was his draft. And I was like, no, this guy's a star. He can score off the dribble. He's got the handles, shot creations there at a high level, simple translation. But really, I mean, despite not even just the fact that the Hornets were a bad spot for him, he just hasn't been good. Like, he's just been outright not. It's tough to say, but he just doesn't make shots. He doesn't do what he did at UConn. Like, that 40-point game at UConn was, I thought, one of the strongest sells if you were a Bouknight believer, and nothing feels like it's translated. It almost feels like his game is like slowed down in the wrong ways. So I missed on him.
I don't think talent is James's issue. I think Charlotte is a situation where, as we've seen, that they just haven't had vets, and I feel like a lot of their younger players haven't really made good decisions off the court. I think James is going to maybe not. I don't know if he'll ever live up to where he was selected, but I think James is going to be that guy. Charlotte gives up on him. He goes to team 2 on like a minimum deal, and then he has a reduced role, and then he's effective in that role, and then he's fine. Like, I could see him having like a Malik Monk type resurgence, because I don't think talent is his issue, but I get the people that feel like, okay, I'm gonna write him off, because even with Summer League, there were some games where he showed some flashes, but it's like, this is like your third Summer League, I believe. And so, yeah, it's tough for James. For me, I'll give you one. And this was, I still got my big one left that I was totally wrong about. But the guy that I absolutely hated in college, I thought his game was just visually ugly. I just didn't think he was going to make it, was Andre Drummond. I did not like Andre Drummond at all. And I remember I was working for the Texas Legends at the time, and I was trying to get my foot in the scouting, and I told somebody my opinion about Drummond. I was like, and this is, what year was it? 2012?
12. Yep.
So I still liked big men that had touch around the rim, footwork. You know what I mean? Like a guy that with his size, I thought that he had the body where you could throw him the ball in the paint and he could make plays. I just remember thinking like his touch was ugly. He didn't have footwork. So many things I didn't like. And I remember a guy that worked for the Mavs was like, dude is like 17 years old. Like, he just turned 18. He's going to be fine. And he's an elite rebounder, which he ended up having a good career. I do think as the game changed, it definitely changed on him, but he's still been able to hang on. But I did not think Andre Drummond was going to be an NBA starter. And you can make a case and say there's a few years there in Detroit that he was, I think he was an all-star, and he was one of the better centers in the league. So that's one I was just totally wrong about. All right, Leif. Actually, we'll go to you, Richard, again.
Yeah, when you said visually, I forgot the word. You might have just outright said ugly. And I pointed to you. I was like, oh, he's going to say it. He's going to say it. Because this is actually somebody I missed on. And this is Tyrese Halliburton.
He's my biggest one.
So that was one of my biggest too. I was waiting to say it, but when you said ugly, I was like, this is my cue. because it's funny. I should have never missed because I was there. His triple-double against TCU, honestly, one of the best performances I've ever seen in my life from any college player pre-draft or just pre-draft in general. He was getting deflections. He was active defensively. That team had no business winning. And he got a triple-double. It was a very, honestly, I thought his stats undersold what he did. So what did I do come this draft season? I was like, man, he's not that good. The shot's weird. It's not going to translate, kind of the same thing. And the overarching theme of all this, I think, is unconventional, eye test doesn't mean it's not going to, like, it can't work. Like, there's a guy, I forget his name. His last name is Adams in the 90s, but I wish I could remember this guy's name. Michael Adams, yes.
Michael Long Range Adams.
He had one of the ugliest shots ever, but man, he was an all-star. Like, so it doesn't all, like, history shows us this too, and I just chose to ignore it. So that was a huge miss. Not my biggest, but it was a huge one.
I liked Halliburton. I'm not saying this. The one thing that's interesting is I wonder if our personal preferences, like I'm a guard who loves to pass, and like shooting and length, like that type of stuff is something I always look for and I have kind of a soft spot for. So Halliburton for me was either 4 or 5 on my board. And so I really liked him because I didn't think anyone else had the feel for the game that would translate up. And I thought with more space and better players with him, because that Iowa State team was horrendous, that his sophomore year. And so I thought with more space, he'd thrive. I didn't realize he'd be this good, this fast, but I thought that this was the potential. So I wonder if that's kind of the thing is I'm less familiar with what would work for a modern big. And that's why I overestimated Kessler, because I thought he was reliant on just being, someone who stood in the paint for so long and would have trouble, switching out and not being able to stand in the paint with 3-second violations and stuff. So I always wonder if the biggest misses have to do with our natural, tendencies of who we tend to like. I typically have a good track record on guards that pass well, or taller playmakers. That's something I usually am pretty happy with. And I think I'll miss more often on bigs. And I wonder if that's something you guys have found as well.
Yeah, man, we all have our blind spots. I have a friend of mine that's an agent, and he is like, yeah, there's certain guys I'm just going to totally miss out on because it's a blind spot for me. And he was telling me one of the ways that I could become a better evaluator is knowing my blind spots and knowing that there's certain guys you're going to miss out on just because their game may not be visually pleasing. All right, when we return, I'm going to share my notes on Tyrese Halliburton from what draft was that, 2020? And the crazy thing is, I don't think there's anything I wrote in my notes about Tyrese Halliburton as far as my concerns where I was wrong about. Everything that I thought about him that was concerning, they're still there, but his strengths are just so much better than his weaknesses. So stay tuned. I'll share my notes on Tyrese Halliburton from a few years back. All right, last segment. Like I mentioned, I'm going to read my scouting notes on Tyrese Halliburton. I called him Lonzo Ball 2.0. And my strengths where I said he has excellent size. He can play both guard spots, takes care of the ball, high IQ, good court vision. He's a rebound and run threat. He's very good in transition. He's a knockdown shooter. He's very good at finding corner shooters. And at the minimum, he's a ball mover. My concerns, low and slow release on his shot. Only 175 pounds. No mid-range game. Lacks pull-up jumper. Can he make plays out of pick and roll? Doesn't get to the free throw line. Only shot 26 foul shots his last year. And 67% of his field goal attempts are threes. And he's still slim. He's more than 175. I think he's become better at making mid-range shots. The shot is still funny looking. And I guess for me, it's like Leif talked about, you have your biases. I like guards that can break a man down, get to the paint. And even though he has gotten better at that, that's not necessarily his game. He's not, I wouldn't call him like a walking paint touch, but he's just good at what he does. He's a good ball mover. He's a good passer. He knocks down open shots. The shot is not pretty, but he went where I thought he was going to go. But I felt like that year, I thought he would have been perfect in Phoenix. I thought he would have been a good complementary player to like Devin Booker. I never saw him as like the guy on a team. I thought this is a guy that can play with anybody, whether it's a ball dominant guard like a James Harden, even if it's like a point guard like Chris Paul. I just thought he could play with anybody, but I did not see him being like the lead guard, a max player, an all-star, and an engine. And so that's tricky for me because I don't feel like any of my concerns were wrong. I just feel like what he does good, I just underestimated it. What are your thoughts on that, Richard?
Yeah, I was reading my scouting report at the same time. The only things I put on there that you didn't have on the negatives was he goes to the home run play too much and he plays out of control too much at times. And that didn't matter. And I think though, like what you said is true though. Like a big thing about these guys is what you said is right. And sometimes it's going to make these guys not pan out. And sometimes it's going to help them. They know how to maximize their weaknesses minimize their weaknesses, maximize their strengths. And Halliburton is one of those guys. Not every player who gets that scouting report is going to turn out the same way. But I mean, I was looking over my notes. I mean, you hit everything on the head. Like he's somebody who, how do you project somebody so funky and just unconventional? Because that doesn't always translate. There are examples of guys who were unconventional that just didn't make it. They couldn't play the next level because it was too unconventional.
Yep.
And it's hard to know how to draw that line on the spot.
Yep. All right, Leif, who's another one for you?
I wouldn't say I was stupendously low on this player, but I definitely underrated him as Franz Wagner.
Yeah.
I thought Franz Wagner was a lottery pick, but in a redraft, if you were to look at that, he's top 5 probably. And I had him, I want to say at 13 or 14. And what I missed on is I thought he was good at a lot of things, but his shot, even though he shot 38.5%, I believe, as a sophomore, as a 19-year-old sophomore, I felt like, you know what, he's the best player on Michigan, and that was Hunter Dickinson was the lead scorer. Isaiah Livers, well, as a trendy pick, is the most important player among college basketball people. But anyone who watched could tell you he was the best player. My question is, okay, if he's the best player, why doesn't he dominate the game? Like, I could tell you he was the best player because when he was in the game, he made the most impact plays. My question was, okay, so if he doesn't do this at the winning level right here, and they're a 1 seed, but they're not like dominating because of him, I wonder what his impact will be at the NBA level, because he's not a great shooter. He's not great with the ball in his hands. He's solid and above average at all of these at the college level. And I think I underrated his athleticism again. I think I took him as more of like a smooth mover, a glider at the college level, as opposed to a good athlete at the college level. That would be a good athlete at the NBA level. And I think I underestimated the comfort with which he'd have the ball in his hands at the NBA level. I think space helped him a lot, whereas college spacing made him look like, you know, a kind of a solid player plays within himself, whereas the NBA spacing allows him to showcase some of that athleticism that I don't think was abundantly obvious.
If I remember correctly, he did not shoot the ball well at all his freshman year.
Yeah.
And then he was good his sophomore year, but I still wasn't a big believer. Who's another one for you, Richard?
Yeah, one thing before I get there, just last little thought is also Franz Wagner. I won't say where I had him, but you know, I played the 5th. With him, he also had that notable air ball in the NCAA tournament too, which I think really hurt his status as a shooter for anybody who really liked him. I'll go out on 2 real quick. Both are Orlando Magic picks. Since we're choosing Franz Wagner, I'll continue the theme. I had really, really liked Elfrid Payton. I thought his shot was fixable. It wasn't. And then Mario Hezonja, who is another guy. I loved the talent, the Kroby nickname, the athleticism, the jump shot was beautiful. I still think that's the prettiest shot to never go in, but I really underestimated because he was a guy who his feel for the game was really weak. It was significantly behind where his talent and just like raw tools were. And I think that's what caused me to miss on him.
He's on my list. And Hezonja was a guy, if you did not have like synergy and you didn't watch like full games, but I think it was just a small sample size because he was in Barcelona, and so you know you're not going to play a lot that young. But if you just saw his highlights, and I remember on draft day when they showed like his highlights at the NBA draft, I was like, oh, this dude is going to be Luka. Like what Luka is today, I thought Mario was gonna be that guy. Maybe not like, all NBA like his first few years, but I thought like he had the flash and the athleticism. I thought he was gonna like captivate like the European fan base along with the NBA. I thought he was just gonna be a rock star. And I still can't figure out why he hasn't succeeded, because you're like, the shot looks good. He has the athleticism. There's things that he can do. I just can't figure out why he didn't stick or have the career that I thought he's gonna have. All right, I got one for you. This guy was, I still say he's the best high school basketball player that I've ever seen in my own eyes. Josh Jackson. Josh Jackson was so dominant on the high school level. He played 1 through 5. Like, he was blocking shots at the rim, pushing the fast break. He was meaner than everybody else. He was tougher than guys. He was a good enough shooter where you had to respect it. I mean, he dunked on everybody. Like, he guarded all over the floor. And that year I was working on the Under Armour circuit, and we ended up having to play his team a couple of times. And then we played them again in Vegas. And Josh was just, he just did everything. Like, he did not have any weaknesses on the prep level. Then once he got to Kansas, you could see like, all right, he's not necessarily playing like the point center that he played in high school, but you saw that he could make reads. And then the shot, I believe he got off to a slow start, and then he started making shots a little bit at the end of the year. What was he, the 4th pick in that draft?
Yeah.
And he's out the league. I don't think talent is the main reason why he's out the league, but I think that he was like the epitome of jack of all trades, master of none. And I think once he got to the NBA, he did not have the one skill set to hang his hat on. And unfortunately, he's out the league, and I don't even think he's 25 years old. So that was a huge miss for me. Killian Hayes. I had Killian over Lonzo. I know like Kevin O'Connor gets a lot of flack for that, but I was right there with him. Another guy that I'm still kind of, and I'll probably get crucified for this, I was not high on Scotty Barnes. Then he has like a really good rookie year. I feel like his sophomore year was the same, but I'm still not 100% sold on Scotty Barnes being like the guy. I think he's a connective tissue. All right, Leif.
I think that's fair.
What any more for you?
None that are horrible yet. I mean, I'm younger in this, so like Mario Hezonja, I would say I missed, but I was about 13 years old and watched YouTube, so I definitely missed Mario Hezonja, but I don't feel too badly because I definitely didn't have synergy, and there's plenty of guys that I think will be worse than they are. I don't think there's that many guys that have been awesome that I was low on. And I guess I almost prefer it that way, and I'm sure that'll happen in time. I think Franz Wagner and Walker Kessler are the only two that have like really, really exceeded my expectations by an enormous amount, and it's obvious early in their careers. Whereas there's plenty of guys I think will be, here you go, like they're going to be solid players and they're not great, but I kind of rate them at the low end of the lottery. So there's plenty of examples of that. One guy that stands out to me a little bit recently is I had this infatuation at the tail end of the process with Isaiah Jackson, and I started to really hype him up at the end, like very end. I was like kind of middle of the pack with him for a while. Then at the very end, I was like, oh, I like Isaiah Jackson an awful lot. So time will tell with him. I'm not ready to say that one's horrible, but I think watching late in film is something I'm not going to do very much anymore. I think AJ Griffin is another one where I did that, very different reasons. I started watching Kai Jones. I pushed a little bit late, but I still ended up in a pretty like low territory compared to a lot of people, where I end up with him like 19. And so I think one that I think I'm going to be too low on that's yet to be proven me like fully wrong is I was too low on Jeremy Sohan. I think I overthought him a little bit, and I ended up with him at 15 and he went 9. And I think he's going to be a top 7-8 guy in that class. But most of those I feel all right about. There's none that I'm like scratching my head, just like, oh my God, like I'm an idiot for. Mario Hezonja, I'll count him. I fell for the YouTube trap.
All right, do you have a big one left, Richard? I know I got one that
I was hoping nobody would say Sohan. We had one. I vividly remember last year in our shows we would go, so who are you lower than and on the consensus on? And I would always go, Jeremy Sohan. He can't shoot and he's not that athletic. Yeah, he's gonna be better than I thought. So I'll throw him as the last one.
I'm curious to see how it works playing with Victor this year, though, because I don't know if Victor is going to be ready to efficiently space the floor. And with him and Jeremy, I think they're going to be fine on the defensive end, but that lane is going to be tight. I got one last one that I totally whiffed out on. Thomas Robinson. I thought he was going to be a 18-10 guy, 18-10-4 in his prime. He had the huge national championship game. I think he had like 18 points, 17 rebounds against Anthony Davis. So that is one that I missed out on. And I still don't understand why he can't at least be like Tristan Thompson, but I know his hands were an issue. Well, that wraps up this episode. This was a fun one. Big shout out to the crew for coming on. And once again, this is Rafael Barlowe with Richard Stayman, Leif Thulin, and we are